Hello, everybody, um, and welcome to your seed article. Now, I had mentioned that originally in this class, the seed article critique that you guys turned in last week would serve as your potential seed article. The whole idea behind it was for you to get into groups of 4 or so, depending on how even the numbers were, and to get into groups and to take the time to basically review your article. So the first 4 questions of the seed article critique had to do with the 4 main sections of a paper: the introduction, the method, the results, which we are also dealing with this week, and the discussion section, which I will go over in a lecture next week. For these, the first 4 questions pertain to that. Number 2 was very important because it asked you to list the IVs and their levels, and the DV and its operational definition. So you would have had, if you had a proper 2x2 design, you would have had one IV with 2 levels, and you would have defined those levels, and then another IV with 2 levels, and you would have defined those levels, and then the DV. So the only ones that I was really looking for to pay attention to was that question number 2, so that you knew which ones were your variables manipulated and measured, IV and DV, and numbers 5 and 6. 5 was just asking, are there ways to see were there things they didn't control for, or things they could have grouped them better, or things like that. But the other second most important question besides 2 was number 6. And number 6 asked, how could you change your study from the one that we currently have? If you found good results, how would you extend this to a new study? Or how would you change at least one of the variables in order to get a slightly different study? Because what ultimately you would have been doing in groups is choosing one of those seed articles from your group, deciding which one was either easiest to manipulate, which one would work best for college students, or perhaps, since we don't have a lot of outside materials, which one might be easiest to make materials for to be able to run in class. Now, we don't have the luxury of groups. That would be really hard to try to navigate because not everybody has access to internet and not everybody has time together inside class and blah, blah, blah. So instead, your alternative is that everybody gets the same seed article. However, I'm going to also give you a modified version of the project proposal, which just asks for you to identify the original variables in the study and either change them a little or change it a little more to make it your own. The reason we call this a seed article is because it is the seed from which your proposed experiment will come from. So in this case, instead of actually conducting the experiment in class, which I really wish we could do, you're basically going to make a hypothetical experiment with at least one new independent variable. I have no problem giving you a data set and doing the statistics, kind of like you saw if you watched the results section homework. If not, you'll be seeing that after this, right? So, without further ado, I'm going to read you an article called Evil Genius: How Dishonesty Can Lead to Greater Creativity. In this, there's actually 5 different experiments, and remember what I told you for the seed article critique is that if there was more than one experiment, you only needed to concentrate on one. So, does this give you 5 different options to choose from in one article? Well, stick around and we'll talk about it. Evil Genius: How Dishonesty Can Lead to Greater Creativity. Francesca Gino and Scott Wiltermuth, from February of 2014. The publication is on behalf of APS, which is the Association for Psychological Science. So let's get into it. First, we start out with the fact that there are 4 main sections of a research paper, but don't forget there are some specific sections that are not the main ones that we also will have to worry about at least for the final paper. The first one is what we call the abstract, which is right here. It goes right after the looking up title page, right? So title page, then abstract, which will be on its own page. We'll go over the abstract in a few weeks. Then we start with your introduction. You'll notice that it doesn't say the word introduction on there. That's because you go from the second page, which is just the abstract up here. Then on the top of the third page, you just start and go right into it. You don't have the word introduction like you do the word method or the word results or the word discussion as we get to that. So let's begin here. The abstract says, we propose that dishonest and creative behavior have something in common. They both involve breaking rules. Because of this shared feature, creativity may lead to dishonesty, as shown in prior work, and dishonesty may lead to creativity, the hypothesis we tested in this research. In 5 experiments, participants had the opportunity to behave dishonestly by over-reporting their performance on various tasks. Does this sound to you like the first assignment we did on cheating? Kinda, right? That wasn't the point of this. This is just the one I picked out from the ones I was researching, but let's continue. They then completed 1 or more tasks designed to measure creativity. Those who cheated were subsequently more creative than non-cheaters, even when we accounted for individual differences in their creative ability. Experiment 1. Using random assignment, we confirm that acting dishonestly leads to greater creativity in subsequent tasks. Experiments 2 and 3. The link between dishonesty and creativity is explained by a heightened feeling of being unconstrained by rules, as indicated by both mediation, experiment 4, and moderation, experiment 5. So ways to look this up is where the keywords are. So creativity, dishonesty, ethics, moral flexibility, rule breaking, morality, decision making. Those are all keywords that you could have looked in the search, like on Psych info or Psych articles, to try and find this one. Now we'll go to the overall introduction. And then it seems it's broken up into the different experiments, right? So here's the overall introduction to the whole paper. Remember, from the introduction, we talk about the upside down triangle, where first we're just talking about the whole background as it is, and then it's going to get very specific to the point of the hypotheses. So let's take a look at how this is formed. Researchers across disciplines have become increasingly interested in understanding why even people who care about morality predictably cross ethical boundaries. This heightened interest in unethical behavior, so again, they're just introducing unethical behavior in general. This heightened interest in unethical behavior, defined as acts that violate widely held moral rules of norms or norms of appropriate conduct. And I realize I can zoom in on this a little bit. Sorry about that. Defined as acts that violate widely held moral rules of norms of appropriate conduct, is easily understood. Unethical behavior creates trillions of dollars in financial losses every year and is becoming increasingly commonplace. So they're talking about it in one opening paragraph. This is the background, that being dishonest can potentially cost people lots of money. Reminds me of the president, but let's continue. One form of unethical behavior, dishonesty, seems especially pervasive, and pervasive means seen everywhere, right? All over the place. Like other forms of unethical behavior, dishonesty involves breaking a rule, the social principle that people should tell the truth. Much of the scholarly attention devoted to understanding why individuals behave unethically has therefore focused on the factors that lead people to break rules. Although rule breaking carries a negative connotation in the domain of ethics, it does carry a positive connotation in another well-researched domain, creativity. To be creative, it is often said, One must think outside the box and use what we call divergent thinking. What is divergent thinking? Well, they tell us right here, divergent thinking requires that people break some, but not all rules within a domain to construct associations between previously unassociated cognitive elements. And here you can see other citations, right, of papers that have mentioned this exact thing. Balin, 1987, Guilford, 1950. For you guys, you're going to need a minimum of 3 papers. So instead of doing it this way, where you give 1 or 2 lines and then a couple of citations, as I said earlier, you're going to basically do the seed article, the paragraph you're going to do, and then 2 additional articles that you're going to find for this. We'll get to that when we're done. The resulting unusual mental associations serve as the basis for novel or new ideas. The creative process therefore involves rule breaking, as one must break rules to take advantage of existing opportunities or to create new ones. Plays on words, right? Thinking outside the box, those type of things. Thus, scholars have asserted that organizations may foster creativity by hiring these people that are slow to learn organizational code, and by encouraging people to break from their accepted practices or to break rules, at least a little, right? Given that both dishonesty and creativity involve rule breaking, the individuals most likely to behave dishonestly and the individuals most likely to be creative may be one and the same. Indeed, highly creative people are more likely than less creative people to bend rules or break laws. So here we already have sort of an established hypothesis. Those that are more dishonest are going to tend to be more creative, or maybe vice versa, right? Those that are more creative may be the ones that tend to be more dishonest. Let's keep that in the back of our brain. Popular tales are replete with images of evil geniuses, such as Rotwang in Metropolis, Lex Luthor and Superman, who are both creative and nefarious in their attempts to ruin humanity. I think of Gru in Despicable Me, trying to steal the moon or whatever, just to bring it into a little more modern day. Similarly, news articles have applied this evil genius moniker to people like Bernie Madoff, or Bernard Madoff, who made $20 billion disappear using this creative Ponzi scheme. The causal relationship between creativity toward more dishonest decisions. But could acting dishonestly enhance creativity in subsequent tasks? Here's where we go to, right? So we, in the introduction, we started with a very broad general statement. What is dishonesty? These people are, don't follow the rules to a T. And now we go into what we don't know. We don't know if the creative process triggers dishonesty, if acting unethically may enhance creativity, right? So they designed some experiments to in this paper to try and see if one leads to the other or if it's a two-way street. In 5 experiments, we obtained the first empirical evidence that behaving dishonestly can spur creativity and examined the psychological mechanism explaining this link. We suggest, so suggest meaning they predict, right? Hypothesize that after behaving dishonestly, people will feel less constrained by rules and thus are more likely to act creatively by constructing associations between previously unassociated cognitive elements. Now we get to experiment 1. And again, the nice thing about this is you may only need to concentrate on one experiment. But let's see if they meet the criteria for what we're asking, or if you have to create something to meet the criteria. So, experiment 1. Cheaters are creative. In our first study, we examined whether individuals who behave unethically are more creative than others on a subsequent task. even after controlling for difference in baseline creative skills. How do they control? Maybe they use a match design. Let's find out. Here's our method section. And again, we see participants, and this is in a little bit different form than we're used to, right? When we wrote the method section, and we want to stick to this, we had participants, then we had design, then we had materials and apparatus, and then we had procedure. But also keep in mind that there are 5 different experiments in this one paper, so not all of them conform. Plus, this was 2014, so it might have been a different version of the APA style manual. So let's not split hairs here. Keep listening. Method. How many participants did we have? 153 individuals were recruited on Amazon Mechanical Turk, an online program. Participated in the study for a $1 show-up fee and the opportunity to earn a $10 performance-based bonus. In our, obviously, Stroop experiment, we did it for course credit. We told participants that 10% of the study participants would be randomly selected to receive this bonus. So 1 out of every 10 people. If there's 153, then at least 15 would get the prize. Let's look at the procedure. The study involved 4 supposedly unrelated tasks: an initial creativity task, the Dunker candle problem, a 2-minute filler task to distract them, a problem-solving task, and the remote association task, or the RAT. Participants first completed the Dunker candle problem, which you'll see in figure 1. If we look up here, the Dunker candle problem presented to participants in experiment 1. It looks like there's a candle, some matches, some thumbtacks. Well, let's get into this. They saw a picture containing several objects on a table and next to a cardboard wall: a candle, a pack of matches, and a box of tacks, as I had just pointed out. Participants had 3 minutes to place the candle inside. Finding the correct solution is considered a measure of insight, creativity, because it requires people to see objects as capable of performing atypical functions. Meaning, we're used to seeing thumbtacks as just holding things up on the wall, not using them to hold up candles. So you have to think outside the box and get creative to use them for a purpose other than what you normally use them for. So, thus, the hidden solution to the problem is inconsistent with the pre-existing associations and expectations individuals bring to the task. Sometimes a pen can be a weapon because you can stab somebody with it. I hope you would never do that. But there are more things that you can do. Maybe you can use it to conduct a symphony instead of a conductor's wand, right? So it takes a little bit of creativity to use it for something different and come up with the answer. So you need to, this is inconsistent with pre-existing associations and expectations that individuals bring to the task. Next, after they tried to solve it, they performed what's called a filler task. They completed, which is just a word search or something to distract them so they don't keep that solution right in the front of their brain in what we call working memory. So next, participants performed the filler task, then they completed a problem-solving task under time pressure. They had 10 matrices presented with a set of 12 3-digit numbers. And the task was to find 2 numbers in the matrix that added up to 10. This definitely sounds like it's consistent with the cheating assignment, because in the cheating assignment that we did, the very first assignment, we talked about finding 2 numbers in the matrices that added to 10. So you can see where that came in, right? Although it's not the same experiment, because that was Araceli. Participants were shown 1 matrix at a time and had 20 seconds to solve each one. If participants did not find the solution within the allotted time, the computer program moved to the next matrix. After participants attempted to solve the 10 matrices, then they self-reported their performance. For each correct solution, participants could receive $1 if they were among those randomly selected to receive the bonus. The program recorded participants' answers for each matrix, but the instructions did not explicitly state this. Thus, participants could cheat by simply inflating their performance on this task. So it's very much like the cheating one that I gave you at the beginning of class. Finally, participants completed the RAT, or RAT, which measures creativity by assessing people's ability to identify associations between words that are not normally associated. Each item consists of a set of 3 words: sore, shoulder, sweat, and participants must find a word that is logically linked to them, like cold. Cold sore, cold shoulder, cold sweat, right? Participants had 5 minutes to solve 17 RAT items. Success on the RAT requires people to think of uncommon associations that stimulus words may have instead of focusing on the most common and familiar associations of the word. So if we were to digest this, we are trying to see how many people were being creative and if that creativity also led them to inflate their scores on the matrix task or to be better at this RAT and associate words that are not normally known to go together. So let's look at the results and discussion, which again, in some papers, in some journals, results and discussion can be used together. I think I pointed that out in the small lecture on the results section, but we don't do that in this class. So take this as an example, but we're going to turn it into a full APA style according to my rules, which is APA's rules. Results and discussion said 48% of participants correctly solved the candle problem. Almost 59% of the participants cheated on the problem-solving task by reporting they had solved more matrices than they had actually solved. So they think that we had no way of knowing, but there were actually records kept. They just didn't know that. So 59% of the participants cheated on the problem-solving task by reporting that they had solved more matrices than they actually solved. Cheaters performed better on the RAT, meaning they got 9 items correct, than non-cheaters with a mean of 5.76. And you can kind of see from this results section, by the way, if you go back and compare it to the one that you have to do this week for an assignment, that you can see here the means and standard deviations are reported. So we have cheaters, right, performed better on the RAT than non-cheaters, even when we controlled for creative performance on the Dunker candle problem. Cheating on the matrix task mediated the effect of participants' initial creativity on the RAT performance. The effect of baseline creativity weakened, and now this is a correlation, right? Weakened when cheating was included in the regression, and cheating significantly predicted RAT performance. A bootstrap analysis showed that 95% bias-corrected confidence interval, remember our alpha is set to 0.05, for the size of the indirect effect excluded 0, suggesting a significant indirect effect. These results provided initial evidence that behaving dishonestly enhances creativity. Individual differences in creative ability between cheaters and non-cheaters did not explain this finding. So for this first experiment, just looking at this one, there was cheaters and non-cheaters, right? Based on the baseline task, which was the, or I guess you could say honest versus dishonest. So level of honesty would be 1 honest versus dishonest. And then we had the matrices, right? So you had cheating on the matrices and not cheating on the matrices, right? So you had cheating and not cheating, and then you had performance on the RAT test, right? So they looked at baseline, those who solved the creativity, right? So they had, if you wanted to break it down this way, you have two IVs. You have solved creative problems, didn't solve creative problems, and you had cheated on the matrix task and didn't cheat on the matrix task. And then we looked at their those that cheated versus those that didn't cheat, and we looked at their performance on the rat test. And what their prediction was is people that cheated overall, right, would score higher in the rat than not cheating, which is what they found. Yeah, so we could use that to get two IVs, right, if you wanted. And of course, everybody did everything, so this is a within subjects design. So the results provided initial evidence that behaving dishonestly made them more creative. So you could also break this up if you wanted to. Remember that for the task, you have to find a new one and don't just use the one I suggest for everybody, but you could try to do male versus female. So you can have cheating and not cheating, and you can have male and female and break them up into groups. Of course, if you did male and female, you wouldn't be able to do a within subject design. You'd have to do a between subjects design, right? Or in this case, it would probably be a mixed subjects design because you're going to have everybody either cheat or not cheat. And yeah. So think of a way, if you're going to use this experiment specifically as your seed article, two IVs with two levels each, and how you're going to measure it. You can stick pretty closely to this one, or you can simply use it as a basis and create a whole new experiment. So you're not actually going to run the experiment, and you're doing this individually, but you're going to think up an experiment. Try not to make it too complicated, because the more complicated, the more you have to get into that. And how we can mitigate this. Let's look at experiment 2. The act of cheating enhances creativity. One limitation of experiment 1 is that people decided for themselves whether or not to cheat. In experiment 2, we use random assignment to test whether acting dishonestly enhances creativity in subsequent tasks. To induce cheating, we used a manipulation in which cheating occurs by omission rather than commission, and in which people are tempted to cheat in multiple rounds. Because of these features, most people tend to cheat on this task. Well, let's see what they did in experiment 2. So here's the method. 101 students from universities in southeastern United States participated in the study for a $5 show-up fee and the opportunity to earn an additional $10 base bonus, performance-based bonus. We randomly assigned participants to either the likely cheating or control condition. Procedure. The study included 2 supposedly unrelated tasks, a computer-based math and logic game, and that same rat task. The cheating manipulation was implemented in the computer-based game, which involved answering 20 different math and logic multiple choice problems presented individually. Participants had 40 seconds to answer each question and could earn 50 cents for each correct answer. In the control condition, participants completed the task with no further instructions. In the likely cheating condition, the experimenter informed participants the computer had a programming glitch. While they worked on each problem, the correct answer would appear on the screen unless they stopped it from being displayed by pressing the spacebar right after the problem appeared. So if they didn't push the spacebar, boom, there's your answer. The experimenter also informed participants that although no one would be able to tell whether they'd pressed the spacebar, they should try and solve the problems on their own, thus being honest. In actuality, the presentation of the answers was a feature of the program, of course, and not a glitch, and the number of spacebar presses was recorded. We used the number of times participants did not press the spacebar to prevent the correct answer from appearing as our measure of cheating. After the math and logic game, participants completed 12 rat problems, which constituted the creativity measure. So here we have um, control condition where they're not told anything. We have the likely cheating condition, so type of condition, right? Control where they're not given any further instructions. The likely cheating where they're told the answer is going to come up, but you have to push the space bar. And then you have their performance on the rat, right? So what we found as the results in discussion, most participants cheated in the likely cheated condition of the math and logic game. An analysis including only these 51 cheaters and excluding the 2 that didn't revealed that their rat performance was higher in the likely cheating condition, with a mean of 6.2 items correct, than in the control condition, with a mean of 4.65 correct. Similarly, we found a significant difference in rat performance between the 2 conditions when all 53 participants in the likely cheating condition were included in the analysis. So they took them out and found a mean of 6.2 and 4.65. And when they put them back in, 6.25. So it increased a little bit. These results indicate that cheating increased creativity on a subsequent task and provide further support for our main hypothesis. Experiment 3. Breaking rules with and without ethical implications. One may argue that people often deviate from rules when they can, and this makes them more creative, even when the rule they break does not have ethical implications. In experiment 3, we address this alternative explanation by using 2 conditions that did not differ in how likely participants were to disobey the rules, on how to solve the task at hand, but did differ in whether they enabled participants to lie. Because of this feature, participants who lied would break an additional rule, a rule with ethical implications. We reasoned that breaking rules with ethical implications, people shouldn't lie, promotes greater creativity than does violating rules without ethical implications, because of the former constitutes a stronger rejection of rules. As a result, the prediction for this experiment is that only the condition as a result, we predicted that only the condition that enabled lying would enhance their creativity, which would provide evidence that cheating specifically increases creativity. Another difference from the prior experiments is that we used 2 different tasks to measure creativity in experiment 3. So here in the third experiment, we may be getting closer to that coveted 2x2 design method. 129 individuals were recruited on Amazon MTurk and participated in the study for $2. Procedure. We described the study as including various tasks, the first of which was a standard anagram task that tested verbal abilities, so unscramble the letters. To motivate successful performance on this task, we told participants that performance on an anagram task predicts verbal ability, which is correlated with career potential. In this task, participants had to complete as many anagrams as they could in 3 minutes. The instructions specified several rules participants had to follow. For each anagram, participants had to rearrange a set of letters to form a meaningful word. For example, TIARST can make the word artist. In addition, participants were supposed to provide only one answer per anagram, even if the anagram had more than one solution. They chose anagrams that had multiple answers. The instructions stated, the computer program could not validate the answers automatically. Thus, participants had to keep track of how many anagrams they had solved and self-report the number at the end of the task. After participants completed the task, they were randomly assigned to either the likely cheating or control condition. These 2 conditions differed in the choice options people were given to report their performance. In a pretest, we found that on average, participants recruited on MTurk solved 5 to 8 anagrams in an allotted time. Thus, to induce participants to inflate their performance, in the likely cheating condition, we use the following options. 0 to 8, lower verbal learners. 9 to 14, average for students in good colleges. Getting 15 to 20 is typical for students in Ivy League colleges. And over 21, common for English professors and novelists. Because most participants would likely fall into the lower verbal learners category, that threatens their intelligence, and they would therefore be tempted to cheat by inflating their performance, because if we have no way of knowing, they can just lie to us. In the control condition, we use the following options: 0 to 5 for average students in good colleges, 6 to 10 typical for Ivy League, 11 and higher for English professors and novelists. So it was very much deflated in that case. In this case, most participants would likely fall into an acceptable bracket and would therefore not feel tempted to lie. Thus, participants in both conditions had the opportunity to break the numerous rules listed in the instructions, but those in the likely cheating condition were definitely more tempted to lie. Following the anagram task, participants completed 2 tasks assessing their creativity. The uses task, USES task, and 17 rat problems as in experiment 1. For the uses task, they had to generate as many creative uses for a newspaper as possible within 1 minute. So I know that a newspaper could be used to put at the bottom of a cage to, like a hamster cage so that you can get their poop. It could be used for bedding. It could be used to wrap presents, right? These are the things that you can do with newspaper. To assess creativity, we coded responses for fluency, total number of uses, flexibility, number of uses that were different from one another, because using it as bedding or using it as a bathroom, probably pretty close together for an animal. And originality, average across those different ideas. So we had the control condition and the high likely cheating condition. We had the assessment was creativity on this task, and looking at rat problems, the RAT problems from experiment 1. If I were to look at this and try to make a 2x2 out of it, I would probably say we have the control condition and the cheating condition, and maybe we have them either take the rat problems or not do the rat problems before this creativity test. The creativity test itself, with fluency, flexibility, originality, would be the DV. The 2x2 would be cheating condition or control condition, and whether or not they did rat questions or no rat questions, right? So that could be a way to do this. And then what I want you to do is to come up with at least one other option. So I gave you guys gender originally, so maybe you change taking the rat and not taking the rat to gender to see if males and females would cheat differently if given the chance, and if males and females are more creative overall, or if cheaters are more creative than non-cheaters overall, or if there's an interaction between those. But gender is pretty easy, and gender makes it a between subject. If you wanted to keep it a within subject, you might try a different IV. And like I said, you don't need to make this consistent specifically with this task of cheating on paper or creativity, right? We can change it a little or change it a lot. In this case, your DV could be how much cheating they did or how creative they were, or thinking about cheating in other modalities, right? Because cheating on an exam, does that also lead to cheating on your partner and creativity? So you could change this in a way to make your IVs work and make your experiment about people who are likely to cheat on their partners, and do they come up with more elaborate lies or explanations. This is another way that I'm trying to tell you that you can change the whole sort of basis of the experiment but still keep it within the framework of the seed article. I just need to know how you got from this article to what you're proposing to do. Results and discussion. Table 1 reports the means for key variables assessed in this study separately for the 2 conditions. 40% of participants in the likely cheating condition did in fact cheat. Only 4.7% in the control group actually cheated. So we see that there in the results, right? Those in the likely cheating scenario definitely cheated a lot more. All measures of creativity were higher in the likely cheating condition than in the control condition, as would be expected. Fluency on the uses task, flexibility, and originality, thus cheating enhanced creativity in all three of those areas, right, that they coded for. Fluency, flexibility, and originality. We saw a lot more in the likely cheating group. Did they control for creativity? Not really sure, and I don't know how they would do that necessarily. Experiment 4, feeling unconstrained by rules. In experiment 4, we examined why cheating enhances creativity by measuring the extent to which participants felt they were not constrained by rules. We also used a different task to assess cheating. In our previous studies, we used tasks in which performance was partially due to ability and effort. Such tasks may be cognitively depleting, and behaving honestly may have required greater cognitive effort than behaving dishonestly. In experiment 4, we used a coin toss task in which cheating and acting honestly likely involved the same cognitive effort. Finally, we also measured the affect, which is mood, to rule out the possibility that emotions partially explain the effects of dishonesty on creativity. Well, it's been known that when people get into a emotional battle, that their emotions make them potentially lie more because they don't want to get caught or for whatever reason. So here we see in table 1, this is the key variables for experiment 3, likely cheating and control. Here's the number of anagrams solved, fluency, flexibility originally, and here's the number of rat items that were solved, looking to see if there was consistency there. A lot of these seem like single variable, right, single IV cases, so we would want to combine these potentially, and that's why I give you an article with 5 different experiments, because you can pick and choose from each of them separately, figure out how you would want to create your own version of this experiment. So it could be using anagrams, it could be just using the rat test, it could be something completely different, and you talk about doing the cheating and non-cheating, and then seeing how if they've cheated in a relationship before, or how likely they would be, right? These are different things that you could do. So for the 4th experiment, we had 178 individuals recruited same way on Amazon MTurk. And in this case, they participated for $1 in the study and the opportunity to earn another $1. I know this isn't a lot. You can come up with a creative way and say, pretend you had unlimited resources and say we offered $10 per participant, $100 per participant, whatever you want to say, right? That's the beauty of not having to do it in class, is that you can put your own spin on it that would make people enticed. And hopefully, if you paid them more money, that also might be an idea of whether or not they would tell the truth, right? So we can manipulate it by saying people that were told they'd get $1, so they didn't have a lot of maybe merit to be honest, versus people that got paid $100 and you asked them to be honest. That would be a good one, right? So those that were paid $100 and those that were paid $1, you might imagine that those paid $100 would be more likely to be honest and do what they were told than the ones that were paid less. All right, let's move on to part 4, experiment 4. So the instructions explained that the goal of the study was to investigate the relationships among people's different abilities: attention, performance under pressure, and luck. Participants also learned that they would receive monetary bonuses, money bonuses, based on their performance on different tasks. So that would be some sort of external motivation, right? We first asked participants to guess whether the outcome of a virtual coin toss would be heads or tails. After indicating their prediction, participants had to press a button to toss the coin virtually. They were asked to press the button only once. To give participants room for justifying their own that the researchers could actually tell whether or not the participants cheated. Because if you can't tell, what good is this experiment? Afterward, for each of the 3 pictures, Participants used a 7-point scale from which we call the Likert scale, from 1 not at all to 7 very much, to respond to the question: if you were in the situation depicted in the picture, to what extent would you care about following the rules? So you'll get a 1 to 7 average. We averaged each participant's answer across the 3 items to create a measure that they called caring about rules. And here you see the alpha level is 0.81. It should be pointed out that this would be Cronbach's alpha for internal reliability, that the 3 questions or the 3 items on this scale were very much related to each other, right? So I'm just pointing out, we've already talked about reliability and validity. That alpha 0.81 is what we would call Cronbach's alpha. Okay, participants then completed the same 2 creativity tasks as in experiment 3, which remember was the rat task and the measure of creativity on flexibility and originality. Yeah. Finally, participants indicated how they felt right after the coin toss task. So you can, you have an IV here that's emotion, using a 20-item positive and negative affectivity schedule called the PANAS. The PANAS, or PANAS, I guess, PANAS, captured both positive affect and negative affect. So good Cronbach's alpha for both, good reliability, on a 5-point scale, very slightly or not at all to extremely. Results and discussion. 24% of participants cheated on the coin toss task. Table 2 reports the means for the key variables assessed in this study. And I think that's table 1. So table 2 is going to be, well, down below. We'll get back to it. So participants, reports the means for key variables assessed separately for cheaters and non-cheaters. What they found in experiment 4 is that participants who cheated on the coin toss task reported caring less about the rules than those that did not cheat. All 4 measures were creatively higher for cheaters than they were for non-cheaters. Here's fluency on that uses task. Cheaters and non-cheaters reported similar levels of positive and negative affect or emotion after the coin toss task. So emotion didn't seem to play much of a role in it. We tested whether participants' feelings about rules explained the link between cheating and creativity. For this analysis, we standardized 4 measures of creative performance and then averaged them into one composite measure. The effect of cheating on creativity was significantly reduced when participants caring about rules was included in the equation, and such feeling predicted creative performance. These results provide evidence explain the relationship between dishonesty and creativity using a traditional mediation approach. In this new experiment, 5, we obtained further evidence for this mediating mechanism using a moderation approach. So, what did they do? 208 individuals from the northeastern United States. So you can see that they're getting their subjects or their participants from different parts of the US, right? We've had Southeast, here we have Northeast, right? So you can see that 56 male, 44% female. Here's figure 2, images used to assess the extent to which participants in experiment 4 felt unconstrained by the rules. So here's a picture of somebody riding a bike where it says no biking or cycling. Please do not go beyond this point, and you see lots of people beyond that point. And danger, deep water, no jumping or diving, and you clearly see 2 people attempting to jump in. So these were among the images that were shown for people to see how they felt about the rules, right? And we can actually use modern day examples of not wearing your masks, protesting, going to the beaches when they're saying don't go to the beaches, right? So that is sort of a good way to keep in mind about maybe how people feel about this. Or you can use the litmus test of Colin Kaepernick taking a knee and how people were up in arms about that or not, right? So these are just suggestions for you to enhance. All right. So the participants participated in this study for $10 and the opportunity to again earn additional money. Procedure. Participants were randomly assigned to one of 4 experimental conditions. So here is your true 2x2 design. We have 2 experimental conditions, cheating condition, opaque versus transparent, and 2 prime conditions, rule breaking versus neutral prime. Between subjects design. Here, very clearly, you can base your experiment on. This was the jackpot one, right? This was experiment 5. I didn't want to point it out at first, but I'm showing you now. So we have cheating condition, opaque versus transparent, and priming condition, rule breaking versus neutral prime. They read that they would be completing a series of short tasks involving luck and skill, and that some of these tasks involved a bonus payment. The first task was a die throwing game. In this game, participants could throw a virtual 6-sided die 20 times to earn points, which would be translated to real dollars and added to their final payment. So it's kind of like going to Vegas, huh? Participants were reminded that each pair of numbers on opposite sides of the die would add up to 7. 1 versus 6, 2 versus 5, and 3 versus 4. We called the visible side that was facing up U for up, and the side on the opposite that was facing down and invisible, D for down. Participants received the following instructions. In each round, the number of points you score depends on the throw of the die as well as the side you have chosen in that round. Each round consists of 1 throw. Before throwing, you have to choose the relevant side for that round. Note that the die outcomes are random, and the outcome you see on the screen corresponds to the upside. For instance, if you've chosen D in your mind and the die turns out to be up to be 4, you earn 3 points for that throw. Whereas if you have chosen up, you earn 4 points for that throw. So, across the 20 rounds, you can earn a maximum of 100 points. Each point is worth 20 cents, so you can make a maximum of $20. In the opaque condition, participants had to choose between up and down in their mind before every throw, and after each throw, they had to indicate the side they had chosen before the throw. In the transparent condition, participants were also asked to choose between up and down in their mind before every throw, but in this case, they actually had to report their choice before throwing the virtual die. Thus, the opaque condition tempted participants to cheat by indicating after each throw that they had chosen the side of the die that corresponded to a higher number of points, whereas the transparent condition did not allow for cheating. So you'll have cheating versus not cheating, or opaque versus transparent, and you have neutral prime versus rule-breaking prime. So what is that? After throwing the task, participants performed an ostensibly unrelated task called memory game. Their task was to find matching graphics in a 4x4 grid, like memory, that contained 8 different pairs of hidden images, so the game memory. Participants could click on 2 cells in the grid at a time to reveal the images. Participants were reminded that we were interested not in how quickly they completed the task, but rather in how many clicks they needed to complete it successfully. We used this task to introduce our second manipulation. Half of the participants, which we called rule-breaking prime condition, or they called it, were presented with a grid in which 5 of the pairs were pictures of people breaking rules, so kind of like the ones you saw up above. And the remaining 3 pairs were neutral, so mountains or, a school or something like that. The other half of participants in the neutral condition just saw 8 pair of neutral pictures. Finally, participants completed the measure of creativity, the same rat problems that were used in experiment 1. So their creativity was measured by how they performed on the rat. Prediction. We expected that rule-breaking prime promoting creative behavior only in the transparent condition. We expected participants in the opaque condition to feel already sufficiently unconstrained by rules after behaving dishonestly in the die-throwing game. We therefore did not expect rule-breaking prime to influence creativity among people that didn't cheat. So that right there is predicting an interaction in a lot more words. Results and discussion. A 2x2 analysis of variance, ANOVA. This would be between subject as opposed to our within subject type for the results section homework. Revealed a significant main effect of cheating and a non-significant effect of prime. which is basically what they predicted. The interaction was significant. And here you see the F of 1 and 204 equals 4.8. The only thing that's different in here is they have this eta squared number, which we don't. And they don't have the mean square error. So obviously we're going to conform to that rule. In the opaque condition, rat performance did not vary with prime condition. So F was less than 1. In the transparent condition, we see that there were more creative people in the rule-breaking prime condition than in the neutral prime condition. And these results provided further evidence that acting dishonestly makes people feel unconstrained by rules, and this lack of constraint enhances creative behavior. So if we really are going to concentrate on a study for this as your seed study, the fifth one is the perfect one. Of course, they used a bar graph, and you can see where a line graph would be much easier to see an interaction here. So let's look at the general discussion. There is little doubt that dishonesty creates costs for society. It is less clear whether it produces any positive consequences. This research identified one such consequence that's positive, demonstrating that people may become more creative after behaving dishonestly because acting dishonestly leaves them feeling less constrained by the rules and more free to be creative. By identifying potential consequences of acting dishonestly, these findings complement existing research on behavioral ethics and moral psychology, which is focused primarily on identifying antecedents to unethical behavior, or who's destined to be a rule breaker. And it also begs the question that I told you guys, is cheating, 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 cheating? Those that cheat on exams, those that make up, stretch the truth or make up lies, and those that cheat on their partners. Is it the same type of cheating? These might be things that you can think about to change at least one of the IVs, if not more, to make your own article, your own experiment. These findings also advance understanding of creative behavior by showing that feeling unconstrained by rules enhances your creative sparks. More speculatively, our research raises the possibility that one of the reasons why dishonesty is so widespread in today's society is that by acting dishonestly, people become more creative, and this allows them to come up with more creative justifications for their immoral behavior, and therefore makes them more likely to behave dishonestly, which may make them more creative, and so it might be a never-ending cycle. In sum, this research shows the sentiment expressed in the common saying, rules are meant to be broken, is at the root of both creative performance and dishonest behavior. It also provides new evidence that dishonesty may therefore lead people to become more creative in their subsequent endeavors. So, you can use this, especially the fifth experiment, which is a true 2x2 between subject design. And it doesn't matter if we do between subject or within subject. Just know that between means that you have 4 groups and participants are only going to be part of one group or the other. Not all of them. They're only going to be part of one of the 4. If you were to do a within subjects design, then everybody would have to be part of all 4. So you wouldn't be able to change to a variable like gender or something that you can't, assign into groups. They're already either male or female, short or tall, right? You can change the measure of what short and tall means so that, you make sure you get half and half. But I want you to think of the other types of ways that you can change this. You can change the DV. Instead of using the rat for them to cheat, you can talk about a test or some way to find out if they have ever cheated on their significant other, and then figure out a way for them to show their ability to lie or things like that. So does one cheating mean that they'll cheat in all facets of the game? So that's the article. Again, number 5, if you look right here on the bottom of page 8, the 2x2 analysis variance. If I go up a little bit to the, was it here? Procedure, yes. Participants were randomly assigned to one of 4 experimental conditions in a 2x2 between subjects design. So these, if you want to use this as the basis of the original seed article, this is the 2x2 study. We have opaque versus transparent. What did those mean? It tells you right here that one of them, you didn't have to tell them whether you chose up or down. And in the transparent one, you did have to tell them. So the opaque one was the cheating condition. Prime condition was looking at the matching sets for the memory game. You would have 5 pictures that kind of looked like this, showing people breaking rules, and 3 normal ones. In the non-prime condition, or the regular prime condition, it was just 8 pictures that were the same of random objects that had nothing to do with rule breaking or cheating, right? So this brings us to the last part. This is our, and I should start at the beginning, so I'm going up, our project proposal for Psych 92. Now, when you guys were in groups, there was it was a group element. This was going to be turned in. There was going to be a prediction of a graph and things like that. But I'm not going to do all of that. Since you guys are working by yourselves and you're only proposing a hypothetical experiment that you are going to make up based on this, then you have the creativity at your own fingertips, but you don't have to do as much as you would have done in groups. So this assignment in its original form was meant to be done, meant to be done in teams. I'm gonna have to try and change that if I can. Cool, saving now. For the original seed article critique, your team was to pick one of the articles that your team came up with and use that as your team experiment, as I explained at the beginning of this lecture. The idea was to take the experiment and change it a little or a lot to make it your own experiment. Some of the things to keep in mind were that some experiments were done on children or older adults, and this would have needed to work in a setting with college students. So you would have had to change it to accommodate the participants you had in class. You don't have to limit yourself to this anymore because this is a hypothetical experiment. For this version of the project, we are now using the article I provided to you in this recording. Based on that experiment, I want you to list the original IVs, level of those IVs, and their operational definition. If you wanted to use IVs from 1 through 4, experiments 1 through 4, you can just name a couple of them. One would be cheating and not cheating, and then maybe one would be, something else from the other experiments. Or to make it easy on yourself, just use experiment 5 because it's already got the 2x2 design. So list the original IVs and their levels and their operational definition, which I just went over, like we did for the design portion of the method section. Then I would like you to tell me what the DV was and how they define that, which of course was cheating, right? Based on the rat test or things like that. Below the original definitions, I want you to think about how we answered question 6 for that seed article critique last week on how to change or extend the experiment to change it enough to make it a new version of the original, which is what I've been telling you. This can be accomplished by simply changing one of the IVs or maybe the DV, the way you measure it. If you want to get more creative, you can change both IVs and the DV as long as it has to do with something close to cheating, as long as I can figure out how you got from this seed article that we just went over to the new one that you're proposing. How did you make the leap from point A to point B? When you make the changes, whether they're slight by 1 IV or more than slight, I want you to just give me a small justification of why you changed it the way you did. So if you changed it to gender, why did you do that? Do you think that most likely males are more likely to cheat than females, or maybe vice versa? That could be based on anecdotal evidence, personal evidence, or something maybe you read in an article. Finally, with the new version of this experiment that you're proposing, I want you to list your hypotheses. There should be 2 main effects and 1 interaction. 1 main effect for the levels of IV1, 1 for the levels of IV2, and the interaction between them. So this means you will have 2 main effects and predict which level will score higher, aka the direction of the effect. And you will have an interaction. You do not have to predict a specific kind. You would just say, we predict there will be one. If you do not believe there will be an interaction and you think the lines will be parallel, then just type, I predict there will be no interaction between IV1 and IV2, whatever you labeled them. So my example for you guys, is researchers wanted to see under what conditions people were most likely to help or rescue other people. The researchers manipulated the groups by gender, so males and females. That was IV1, and in accordance with the clothing they were wearing. So we had dark clothing versus light clothing. So here we have 4 groups: males with dark clothing, males with light clothing, females with dark clothing, and females with light clothing. The researchers measured how many people attempted to help that individual after watching them in trouble. So either by the behavior of actually trying to help them in some way or calling the police or something like that. So in the original experiment, the first IV was gender with 2 levels. Male, which could be defined as XY chromosome or identified as male characteristics, facial hair and things like that. And female, XX chromosome are identified as females with female characteristics, right? Wide hips and things like that, or wider than males, right? The other IV was type of clothing with 2 levels. Light clothing, clothes that were a lighter color, white, yellow, or brighter colors of that nature. And dark clothing, clothes that were a darker color, dark blue, black, or darker colors of that nature. The dependent variable was helping behavior, which was defined as making any attempt to help the person in trouble, whether it's calling the police from your cell phone, shouting at the person who was attacking to scare them, or physically coming to try and save this person. In the new version of the experiment, I'm proposing to change type of clothing to maybe political affiliation. We see a lot of this divide in our country now with people protesting conservative versus liberal. Liberal. I feel this is relevant given the divide between these parties now. It says no, it should say now. Put a W. Regarding the president's actions and protests going on during this pandemic. This makes the new experiment look like this. IV1, gender, male versus female, same operational definition. And IV2, instead of clothing, is now political affiliation with 2 levels, conservative or Republican values, defined as those that support values of the Republican Party, such as pro-life, etc., and liberal or democratic values, defined as those that support the values of the Democratic Party, pro-choice, believe in helping others, believe in climate change, etc. So, looking at that stuff, the DV is still helping behavior as was originally defined in the original experiment. So all I did was change clothing type to political affiliation. So it's a completely different independent variables with 2 completely different levels. This makes it a brand new study. I'm not changing it very much. You can do this, or you can change all the variables as long as it has that theme of somehow of cheating or dishonesty or creativity, right? So based on these variables, I have 3 predictions. I predict a main effect of gender, in which I believe overall females are more likely to be helped than males, not to helped. So I'll try and fix that too, but I don't know if it'll let me. Nope, looks like I have to reload. Females are more likely to be helped than males, regardless of political affiliation. Remember, a main effect is the 2 levels of one IV as if the other IV didn't even exist. So regardless of any political affiliation. A main effect of political affiliation, in which liberals are more likely to be helped because they're the party that's known for helping other people more, I guess. So I would predict liberals are more likely to be helped than conservatives, regardless of their gender. And of course, I predict that there will be an interaction between gender and political affiliation. So down below, now it's your turn, number 1, and you can expand this if you need to. Down below, just fill in the blank areas. What are the IVs and levels of the original seed article? Again, I suggest if you want to make it easy on yourself, just use experiment 5. And what is the DV and how is it defined? So give me the 2 levels of each IV and how they are operationally defined. Give me the DV and how it's operationally defined, how they measured. Then number 2 says, what are the IVs and levels of the newly proposed experiment, which means change at least 1 IV. And maybe keep the others. What is the DV and how is it defined? Is it the same or did you change it up? And finally, what are the 3 hypotheses for your newly proposed experiment? Again, 2 main effects and whether or not you predict an interaction. I'd rather you did predict an interaction, but if you don't predict an interaction, that's fine too. If you expect them to, there not to be a difference in the differences. So with that being said, good luck. I'm going to give you until next Sunday to do this. If you have any questions, I have office hours every day from 2 to 3, or you can email me and we can meet outside of those times if need be. And as always, I'll talk to you soon.